You won't believe it, but there is a whale known as the loneliest in the world. Scientists have discovered a whale nicknamed Whale 52 Hertz. It sings at a frequency different from all other whales, and no one responds to it. Its call goes unheard or misunderstood. This whale seems to sing an eternal song in solitude. The story has become a metaphor for human isolation and loneliness. Millions of people around the globe empathize with it, seeing their own feelings reflected in its plight. Sometimes even an animal becomes a symbol of what it means to be misunderstood in a vast world. The medieval chivalric order still exists and even issues its own passports. The sovereign military order of Malta, founded during the Crusades, is recognized by the international community as a sovereign entity, despite not having its own territory. The order has its own passports, stamps, and even currency, the Maltese scudo. It boasts tens of thousands of knights, volunteers, and doctors working around the globe. Many find it surprising that this medieval institution continues to thrive in modern times, preserving not only traditions but also real legal privileges. It is one of the few instances where the past and present coexist side by side. A story that sounds like a spy novel. Scientologists infiltrated U.S. government agencies. In the 1970s, followers of this religion conducted Operation Snow White. Their goal was to destroy documents that could harm the church. Scientologists secretly entered buildings, stole materials, and attempted to disrupt investigations. Ultimately, the FBI uncovered the conspiracy, making it one of the largest cases of illegal infiltration into government structures. For many, this event was shocking. A religious organization operated using intelligence agency tactics. It turns out that real life can sometimes be far more dramatic than fiction in movies. Imagine a person who would have to eat 100 pizzas a day to survive. Tiny hummingbirds expend so much energy that they need to eat almost every 15 minutes. Their metabolism is so accelerated that if a human had the same, they would need to consume about 150,000 calories a day. That's roughly like eating 100 large pizzas daily. Without food, a hummingbird can die in just a few hours, so they live in a constant race for fuel. Their tiny hearts beat at a frantic pace and their bodies operate at full capacity. These birds are like the sports cars of the natural world. It sounds incredible, but one mistake on the stock exchange cost $100 million. In Japan, a trader accidentally entered the wrong number. Instead of selling 6 shares at 610,000 yen, he sold 610,000 shares at 6 yen. The computer system didn't allow for the trade to be canceled, resulting in a colossal loss for the company. This incident is known as a fat finger error, when a single clumsy keystroke leads to catastrophic consequences. Imagine, a simple typo, which we often attribute to inattention, turned into an amount equivalent to the budget of an entire city in the financial world. Vladimir Lenin was not only a revolutionary but also an avid chess player. During his exile in Siberia, he played correspondence games, solved chess problems in studies, and later often used chess metaphors in his writings. For him, chess was not just a game, but a training ground for strategic thinking. Imagine, he could manage several games at once while in exile and simultaneously work on political texts. Chess helped him hone his patience and ability to calculate moves. Thus, the revolutionary known for his decisive actions was a cool-headed strategist on the board, capable of waiting for the right moment to make a winning move. In the 19th century, watermelon became not only a delicacy, but also a secret ingredient for juices. Watermelons were used not just as a standalone fruit, but also as a base for vitamin blends. They were added to juices to balance the flavor. Watermelon made the drink smoother and more pleasant, reducing the excessive acidity and bitterness of other fruits. Imagine a glass of orange juice that's too sour to drink without grimacing. Add a bit of watermelon, and the taste becomes refreshing and harmonious. This technique is still used in cooking today, and it was once a true discovery. Leonardo da Vinci observed a mathematical law in the most ordinary trees. In his notes, he remarked that if you add up the thickness of all the branches of a tree at a certain height, it will equal the thickness of the trunk. This remarkable observation has been confirmed by modern research. Trees that follow this rule are better able to withstand strong winds and storms. Leonardo made a discovery that ecologists and biologists still use today. It turns out that the artist and inventor recognized patterns in nature that science was only able to prove centuries later. A true example of how a genius was ahead of his time. Did you know that the Pentagon cannot account for half of its budget? The U.S. Department of Defense is regularly audited, and each time it turns out that a huge portion of its expenditures remains unaccounted for. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. The reasons include the complexity of the system, bureaucracy, and sometimes plain negligence. But for taxpayers, it sounds absurd. The world's largest military spends money but cannot clearly explain where it goes. This fact has fueled numerous conspiracy theories and distrust in the government. In any case, it's a striking example of how even a massive organization can get lost in its own accounts. Have you ever wondered what dinosaurs actually sounded like? In the famous Jurassic Park, the monsters sound so terrifying that it sends chills down your spine. But the sound designers didn't find recordings of prehistoric reptiles. No one has ever heard them. Instead, they combined the most unexpected sounds, like the moans of mating turtles. These became the foundation for the fearsome roars on screen. It's amusing to imagine viewers holding their breath, believing in the terrifying roar of the T-Rex. While in the studio, sound engineers are stifling laughter, knowing that the king of the dinosaurs sounds suspiciously romantic. Sometimes the truth is more absurd than fiction. You can sue for hundreds of thousands over coffee. In 1994, American Stella Liebeck burned herself with hot coffee from McDonald's. The drink was so overheated that the woman suffered serious burns and underwent skin graft surgeries. The court found the chain guilty. It turned out the company knowingly served coffee at a temperature that was dangerous to health. Ultimately, Liebeck was awarded a compensation of $640,000. This case became a symbol of American lawsuits, but it actually showed that even a familiar cup of coffee can turn into a source of trouble. Once, Xerox was not a generic term, but a proud brand name. Today we say make a photocopy even when using a completely different machine. This is an example of so-called genericide, when a name becomes so popular that it turns into a generic term. The same has happened with escalator, Scotch tape, and even Frisbee. For the company, this is not a joy, but a serious loss. They lose legal protection, and the brand ceases to belong to its creators. The paradox is that too much fame can turn into a disaster. You've created a legend, and now it's out in the world without you. What a surprise! It turns out that smart people are the ones who remember their dreams most often. Researchers have noticed a pattern. Individuals with high intelligence and rich imagination tend to recall their dreams and can recount them in detail. This is linked to brain activity during the rapid eye movement REM sleep phase. Of course, this doesn't mean that someone who forgets their dreams is unintelligent, but the connection is intriguing. Perhaps a developed imagination helps retain nighttime images. It seems that dreams serve as a kind of workout for the brain, and those inclined toward creativity receive a bonus in the form of vivid memories. Once in the Chesapeake Bay, oysters created true living islands. In the 19th century, there were so many oysters in the Chesapeake Bay that they literally covered the surface of the water. Huge clusters of mollusks even obstructed the passage of ships. But as usual, humans intervened. Over 100 years, people nearly depleted these colossal reserves. By 2011, the oyster population had declined by 99.7%. From a rich natural carpet, only tiny fragments remain. A stark reminder that nature is not infinite. You won't believe it, but there's a name for the lint in your pocket. Those tiny little balls that accumulate in the corner of your pocket are called nur. They consist of threads, fibers, bits of paper, and dust. Gradually, they roll into dense clumps, especially after washing. We usually regard them as trivial, but scientists have an official term for this phenomenon. It's amusing that even something as small as a lint ball in your jeans has its own definition in science. Sometimes it feels like language is ready to describe absolutely everything, even the most insignificant details. The story of the fire hydrant began with irony. Its first patent was burned. The tale is ironic. An invention created to fight fire itself vanished in flames. The exact design of the first hydrant remains unknown because the documents were destroyed in the fire. Scholars and historians can only speculate about who might have been the inventor. The hydrants we are familiar with on the streets only began to appear in large numbers years later. It creates a true paradox. We use this invention every day, yet the name of the first person who devised this method of saving lives is forever lost to the fire. The paradox is that the first multicellular organisms went extinct almost immediately. 2 billion years ago, the Earth's atmosphere temporarily had more oxygen. This is when the first multicellular beings appeared. It seemed like life had taken a huge leap forward. However, after a while, the oxygen levels dropped again, and these pioneers disappeared without leaving any descendants. Scientists refer to them as the Franzvillian biota because their remains were found in Africa. It turns out that nature's first trial run failed, yet without it, we might not exist. Every failure in evolution paved the way for new attempts. It may seem surprising, but trousers, which are now commonplace, were once considered a symbol of savagery. The ancient Greeks mocked the Persians for wearing pants, calling them bags. For the Greeks and Romans, the tunic was the attire of a civilized person. Trousers were seen as coarse and barbaric clothing until the Romans, expanding northward, encountered the Celts and adopted this practical wardrobe item. It's amusing to think that today it's hard to imagine our world without trousers, while once they were a sign of barbarism. The history of fashion knows how to take incredible turns. It sounds bizarre, but the playwright Aeschylus was killed by a turtle. The great ancient Greek tragedian met his end in the most absurd way. An eagle dropped a turtle on his head, mistaking his baldness for a rock suitable for breaking the shell. This incident has gone down in history as one of the strangest examples of irony of fate. Aeschylus, who wrote about the greatness of the gods and the destinies of heroes, became a victim of absurd chance himself. One could say that life played a tragic comedy on him, and his name is now associated not only with great plays, but also with an extraordinary death. The sea lily may look like a flower, but it is actually an ancient animal. The name is misleading. Sea lilies resemble flowers on long stems, but they are echinoderms, distant relatives of sea stars and sea urchins. They live on the ocean floor and feed by filtering water, capturing tiny crustaceans and protozoa like living nets. Since ancient times, sea lilies have been considered some of the oldest beings. Their ancestors appeared hundreds of millions of years ago and survived numerous mass extinctions. Interestingly, nature sometimes creates animals that look like plants, which can confuse even scientists. Ordinary clay unexpectedly gave the world the image of a piggy bank. In fact, the term piggy bank has no relation to animals. In Old English, there was the word pig, which referred to red clay. Pots and jars for storing coins were made from it. Over time, the banks themselves began to be associated with this word. However, people later started to interpret pig as pig. Thus, the idea of making banks in the shape of piglets was born. This resulted in a remarkable example of how a linguistic mix-up created an iconic symbol of children's savings. Did you know that the Amish fundamentally do not wear mustaches? This religious group is known for its conservative lifestyle. No electricity, no cars, and traditional clothing. Amish men grow beards but never leave mustaches. The reason is that in the 19th century, mustaches were associated with the military, and the Amish have always been committed pacifists. For them, mustaches symbolize war and violence, which is why they reject them. This shows that even a small detail of appearance can become a powerful symbol of beliefs and a reflection of one's worldview. Long before the invention of the microscope, an ancient Roman scholar speculated about the existence of microbes. Marcus Terentius Varro, in the 1st century BC, wrote that living near swamps is dangerous because, according to him, tiny invisible creatures hover there, capable of entering the body through the mouth and nose and causing diseases. No one had microscopes back then, but Varro's keen observation was remarkable. His advice was long regarded as merely the warning of an elder, but centuries later it was confirmed. Malaria-carrying mosquitoes and numerous pathogenic microbes indeed thrived in swamps. Thus, Varro effectively made one of the earliest hypotheses about the existence of bacteria and viruses. Imagine an animal that can live its entire life without drinking a single drop of water. This is the kangaroo rat, a small rodent found in the arid regions of North America. They obtain all the moisture they need from the seeds they eat. Their bodies are designed so that their kidneys process moisture extremely efficiently, resulting in urine that is thick and almost paste-like. Because of this, they thrive in conditions where even camels would struggle. Remarkably, these tiny creatures have proven to be more resilient than animals renowned for their ability to withstand thirst. Nature seems to have crafted them as a symbol of survival in the desert. Strangely enough, there is a philosophy that rejects logic. It's called anti-intellectualism. Its essence is that intuition and action are more important than reasoning. Proponents believe that conclusions are too slow and unreliable, while traditions and experience are more valuable than any arguments. Essentially, it's a philosophy of do, not think. This approach may seem wild to a rational person, but it has genuinely existed and found followers. Throughout history, there have always been those who trusted their hearts more than their minds. It turns out that even in philosophy, there are teachings that consciously reject the very foundation of philosophy, reasoning. Sometimes science plays with coincidences. The same equation is discovered by two different scientists. The Lorentz equation got its name for a reason. It was derived independently by two scientists, the Danish Ludwig Lorentz and the Dutch Hendrik Lorentz. The difference was nearly 10 years, and they were unaware of each other's work. In the end, both published almost the same discovery. Science sometimes has such quirks. People in different countries working on similar problems arrive at the same results. This shows that discoveries are not random. They hang in the air waiting to be noticed. Excessively bright light can harm the psyche just as much as noise. We tend to think of light as a sign of comfort and safety, but too much of it can lead to stress, anxiety, and even headaches. Overly lit offices or shopping centers can be just as draining as loud sounds. Scientists refer to this phenomenon as light pollution for the mind. Just as you can't dry laundry in fog, the brain can't rest in a constant stream of bright light. Therefore, it's important to regulate lighting. Sometimes soft, dim light is more beneficial than glaring lamps that turn a room into a sterile laboratory. The paradox is that nuclear energy is considered safer than conventional coal and gas. Many people associate nuclear energy with accidents and radiation danger. They think of Chernobyl or Fukushima, and the discussion ends there. However, statistics tell a different story. When comparing the number of deaths and illnesses caused by various energy sources, coal and gas prove to be far more dangerous. Hundreds of thousands suffer from lung diseases due to emissions from power plants, and the climate takes a severe hit. In contrast, nuclear plants generate energy with almost no carbon emissions, and accidents are extremely rare. Thus, we have a paradox. The frightening word nuclear scares people, even though in reality it saves lives. Strangely, female tarantulas live much longer than males, up to 40 years. While males have a short lifespan after reaching maturity, females can survive for several decades. Moreover, they can go without food for up to 2 years if they have access to water. This resilience makes them some of the most unusual spiders. For many, tarantulas symbolize fear, but in reality, they are remarkably patient and enduring creatures. Their lives are slow, almost stretched out in time. And if spiders are known for their ability to wait, female tarantulas are true champions of this art. The most numerous bird in the world is not the sparrow or the pigeon, but the tiny red-billed quelea. These small birds found in sub-Saharan Africa gather in massive flocks and literally devastate grain fields. For farmers, they are a true plague. Thousands of these birds can strip a harvest in just a few hours. The flocks of queleas are so enormous that they appear like a moving cloud. Scientists consider them the most numerous bird species on Earth. Ironically, in cities, we tend to view pigeons as symbols of abundance, but the record actually belongs to the small African queleas. The space menu has long resembled a home-cooked one, featuring borscht and cutlets instead of just tubes. Today, meals in orbit are not much different from those on Earth. Astronauts eat borscht, cutlets, and porridge, all in special packaging. Soups are heated and consumed through a straw, while solid dishes are eaten with a spoon. The main difference is that food can float away, so everything is secured with Velcro and served carefully. Many are surprised to find that luncheon space is not a futuristic powder, but rather a familiar home menu. This way, an astronaut can feel almost at home during mealtime. For a long time, scientists were unaware that the strange transparent larva was a future eel. They believed that the leptocephalus was a separate species of fish. Its transparent, almost glass-like body with a long shape resembled none of the adult inhabitants of the ocean. However, it turned out to be just a stage in the development of the eel. Such an unexpected masquerade of nature. The tiny larva lives its own life and then gradually transforms into the eel we know. Discoveries like this always surprise in science. It turns out that some of the new species are merely disguised teenagers of old acquaintances. A story that sounds like a paradox. A fashion brand burns its own bags. Louis Vuitton and other luxury brands destroy unsold goods. They do this to prevent items from going on sale and devaluing the brand. Bags, clothing, and accessories worth millions of dollars are burned or disposed of each year. It turns out that to maintain the company's image, they are willing to destroy what is a symbol of wealth for many people. This is shocking, but in the fashion world, the logic is different. It's better to burn thousands of bags than to allow them to be sold at a lower price. Want to know the secret of sleep? It turns out that the amount of sleep needed varies by age. Babies require about 10 to 11 hours, teenagers need 9 to 10, adults get by with 7 to 8, and older adults may manage with just 6. Our bodies seem to adjust their internal clocks throughout life. Imagine, a sleep-deprived child is fussy, a teenager sleeps until noon, an adult cherishes rare weekends with long sleep, and an elderly person rises cheerfully at dawn. Sleep is universal fuel for the brain, but each age has its own refueling norm. Beneath the ice of Antarctica lie entire mountain ranges, comparable to the Alps. The Gomburtsev Mountains represent a true hidden world. Their size rivals that of the Alps, but they remain unseen, covered by a layer of ice more than 3 kilometers thick. These mountains formed around 100 million years ago, yet thanks to their icy armor, they have remained almost in their original state. There may be valleys, rivers, and even subglacial lakes, as if frozen in time. Scientists study them only through radar and satellites. Thus, right beneath the feet of the polar explorers lies a vast world about which we know almost nothing. Fashion trends involving animals often lead to diseases and suffering for them. So-called designer breeds of dogs and cats may look unusual and cute, short legs, flat faces, and big eyes. But behind this cuteness lie serious problems. Due to artificial selection, these animals frequently suffer from congenital diseases, ranging from breathing issues to joint deformities. In Scotland, a law has even been passed to ban the breeding of such breeds to prevent further suffering. People aim to make animals more beautiful, but instead they have bestowed upon them a life of constant torment. This is a striking example of how the desire for fashion can turn against nature itself. Robert Howard, the author of Conan the Barbarian, was a friend and ally of H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft, the creator of the Cthulhu mythos, was a close friend of Robert Howard, the legendary Conan's author. They corresponded, discussed their works, and inspired each other. When Howard took his own life at the age of 30, Lovecraft was deeply shaken and soon succumbed to illness and depression. Their friendship became a link between Lovecraft's dark cosmic horror and Howard's heroic fantasy. Thus, two entirely different genres, horror and epic adventure, somehow emerged from a single creative friendship. High humidity can make heat almost unbearable for a person. When it's hot and humid outside, the body literally loses its ability to cool down. The problem is that sweat stops evaporating from the skin, meaning the body can't shed excess heat. As a result, we feel weakness, fatigue, and even stress. It's similar to trying to dry laundry on a foggy day. It stays wet no matter how much time passes. This is why high humidity feels more oppressive than dry heat. The body simply can't cope with natural cooling. Even great doctors can find themselves at the center of family accusations and scandals. Henry Heimlich became famous as the physician who invented the life-saving maneuver for choking, known as the Heimlich maneuver. However, his son Peter claimed that his father merely appropriated others' ideas. and that the Red Cross helped promote the method. Moreover, Peter labeled him a fraud and a vain man craving fame. The family conflict turned into a public scandal, and the image of the heroic doctor became less clear-cut. The story serves as a reminder that even the most noble discoveries can be surrounded by controversy, and behind a prominent name can sometimes lie a complicated individual. It sounds incredible, but the diamond market is artificially restricted. For decades, De Beers has been buying up diamonds and stockpiling them to create scarcity. In reality, there are plenty of these stones in the world, but through supply control, they have become a symbol of luxury and an essential part of engagements. The phrase "diamonds are forever" was also created by advertising. Thus, the value of diamonds is not just about their beauty, but also a carefully constructed illusion. Millions of people believe that diamonds are rare and unique, even though their price is largely a result of clever marketing strategies. Sometimes a word that sounds like a joke hides very real muscle pain. Caripatura is a term sometimes used to describe delayed onset muscle soreness, that familiar feeling when your muscles start to ache after a workout. Scientifically, it's known as delayed onset muscle soreness and occurs due to micro tears in the fibers. The body responds to the strain with inflammation to repair the tissues, which is why the muscles hurt more the next day. In everyday life, this is perceived as a punishment for exercising, but in reality, it's a sign that the body is adapting and becoming stronger. One could say that caripatura is a receipt that the body gives you for the work done. You won't believe it, but some human cells continue to live decades after their owner's death. In 1951, samples were taken from Henrietta Lacks' tumor, and her cells turned out to be immortal. They divided faster than normal and didn't age. These cells, known as HeLa cells, became the foundation for numerous studies, from vaccine development to cancer research. Today, they continue to thrive in laboratories around the world. The irony is that Henrietta herself was unaware of her legacy, and her family struggled for recognition for a long time. It turns out that one person unknowingly gifted science a priceless tool. The paradox is that evidence often only reinforces misconceptions. This phenomenon is known as the backfire effect. When people are presented with facts that contradict their beliefs, they don't change their minds. Instead, they become even more convinced of their viewpoint. This aspect of human psychology explains why debates about politics, religion, or controversial theories rarely end in persuasion. It turns out that truth doesn't always triumph over stubbornness. People tend to defend their views like a fortress, even when the walls of that fortress have long begun to crumble under the weight of facts. A coincidence turned Nicolas Cage into a high school biology teacher in Serbia. In the 1990s, a school textbook was published in Serbia, and a still from the movie Raising Arizona, featuring Cage holding a baby, mistakenly ended up on the cover. For several years, students would open the textbook and immediately see the Hollywood star, as if he were a serious illustrator of school science. It's an absurd detail, but it only makes it funnier. The actor inadvertently became a guide for Serbian schoolchildren. Who knows, maybe that cover inspired someone to take an interest in biology for the first time. Have you ever wondered why a person can't walk straight with their eyes closed? Scientists have conducted experiments where people were asked to walk in a straight line without visual cues. Almost everyone ended up moving in a curved trajectory, often in a spiral. The reason lies in our proprioception, which is the sense of our body's position in space. Without visual guidance, the brain gradually loses its way. Interestingly, a person can navigate by the stars or even by smell, but as soon as the familiar visual control is taken away, we become like drunken sailors, unable to walk straight even for 100 meters. Unexpectedly, the word sect originally had an honorable connotation rather than a frightening one. Today, sect refers to suspicious religious groups associated with deception or fanaticism. However, in ancient Rome, the term secta had a neutral meaning, school or doctrine. It was used to describe philosophical movements and groups of students and followers. For example, the Stoics or Epicureans were considered sects. Only over time, as many religious communities with questionable reputations emerged, did the word take on a negative connotation. Ironically, a term that once meant school of knowledge has transformed into a frightening label. the history of language can be just as surprising as the history of humanity. It's interesting to consider which invention has become the most widespread in history. It's the transistor. Today they are produced in the trillions, with hundreds of millions of transistors for every person on Earth, embedded in computers, phones, and household appliances. Electronics wouldn't function without them. Transistors are so small that we don't think about them, yet they are the building blocks of the digital world. If humanity were imagined as a city, transistors would be the bricks that make up every house, unseen, tiny, but utterly indispensable. Who would have thought that the most stolen book in the world is the Bible? Despite the sanctity of the text, the Bible is the most frequently stolen book from hotels, libraries, and stores. Perhaps it's because it's always within reach, or because someone considers it common property. It's ironic that a book containing the commandment, "Thou shalt not steal," is often the one that gets stolen. This serves as a reminder that even the noblest ideas can clash with the everyday weaknesses of human nature. Strangely enough, small Albania has turned into a country of bunkers. In the mid-20th century, dictator Enver Hoxha ordered the construction of defensive structures in case of war. The result was around 700,000 concrete bunkers scattered across the country. They were placed on coastlines, in the mountains, in backyards, and even near schools. The country resembled a stone anthill. Today, many bunkers are abandoned. Some have been transformed into cafes, museums, and even homes. For tourists, they are a curiosity, while for Albanians, they serve as a reminder of a time when the fear of war was literally embedded in the landscape. A story that sounds like fiction, a caterpillar turns into soup. When it's time for transformation, the caterpillar crawls into a cocoon and literally dissolves its body using enzymes. It becomes a viscous mass from which eyes, wings, antennae, and all other organs are reformed. Essentially, it's a complete reboot of the organism. Scientists are still amazed by this process. The insect destroys itself to build a new body from building blocks. The result is a butterfly, light and vibrant, completely different from the former caterpillar. Nature seems to show that sometimes to change, one must completely break down into parts. Some crabs turn sea anemones into living weapons. Tiny crabs of the genus Labinia hold anemones in their claws and wave them around like living clubs. The anemones sting enemies with their venomous tentacles, protecting the crab while receiving food and a chance to reproduce in return. If a crab loses an anemone, it can tear another in half, and that one will regenerate into two new individuals. Nature's way of providing a backup plan. This is one of the most unusual examples of symbiosis. A small crab with living weapon gloves that can fend off even larger foes. You won't believe it, but Isaac Newton was a secret agent. At the end of the 17th century, he was appointed as the Master of the Royal Mint in England. At that time, the country was struggling with a surge of counterfeiters. Newton didn't limit himself to office work. He disguised himself, visited taverns, gathered evidence, and brought criminals to justice. His efforts led to dozens of arrests. So the author of the Laws of Mechanics was simultaneously waging a real battle against the underground. History remembers him as a great scientist, but few know that part of his life resembled a spy novel. Imagine that the North Star is not a solitary light, but a whole family. We tend to think of the North Star as a lone beacon for travelers in the night. However, it is not a singleton, but rather a complete ensemble. There lies a trio, the bright Polaris A, its tiny companion Polaris AB, and its neighbor Polaris B. From our perspective on Earth, they merge into a single point, but through astronomers' telescopes, this celestial trio becomes visible. Picture a lantern where the light comes not from one bulb, but from an entire string of lights. It's symbolic. Even the guiding star, which has served as a landmark for centuries, does not stand alone, but rather as part of a team. At first glance, it's just a beautiful stone, but in reality, it's a true magician. Alexandrite, a mineral from the Ural Mountains, changes color depending on the lighting. In daylight, it appears green or bluish-green, while under artificial light, it transforms into pinkish red or purple. It's no wonder it's called the chameleon stone. This effect once seemed like magic, and such stones were valued more than gold. Alexandrite is still considered a symbol of change and duality. The same stone shows different faces. It serves as a reminder that life often changes its hues depending on the light from which we view it. There is a specific disorder called dyscalculia, a kind of dyslexia for numbers. People with this condition struggle even with the simplest tasks. They find it hard to understand which number is larger, 6 or 7, or to calculate change in a store. Their ability to perceive time, navigate counting, and remember numbers is often affected. Approximately 7.5% of people worldwide live with this condition. For them, mathematics is not just a difficult subject, but an almost incomprehensible language. Interestingly, a person may be talented in music or art, yet numbers will remain a mystery to them. In India, a farmer spent 19 years trying to prove that he was a living person and not a dead man on paper. Indian farmer Lal Bihari was declared dead in 1975 according to official documents. Fraudsters had registered him in the deceased registry to seize his land. Since then, Lal Bihari fought against bureaucracy for nearly 2 decades to prove he was alive. During this time, he even founded the Association of Dead People to help other victims of similar schemes. It took him 19 years to restore his rights. This story sounds like a dark comedy, but it highlights the absurdity of the bureaucratic system. What's truly surprising is that the zipper was long considered a failed idea. Today, no jacket, bag, or backpack is complete without a zipper. But in the early 20th century, it struggled to gain acceptance. The first models seemed inconvenient and unreliable. Fashion was slow to embrace the innovation, favoring traditional buttons instead. It wasn't until 20 years later that the zipper became popular, first among the military and then in everyday clothing. Now it's hard to imagine a world without this invention, but at one time, the zipper was seen as almost a toy that would never catch on. History once again shows that brilliant ideas often take time to be recognized. Imagine that life on Earth could hit a restart button. There's a hypothesis with a chilling name, Medea. It suggests that microbes can trigger mass extinction events. The idea is that microorganisms, which have dominated the planet for billions of years, can alter the environment so drastically that complex life simply ceases to exist. It's as if Earth returns to its original state. This concept is controversial but eerie. Nature sometimes seems to reset its experiments, as if pressing a restart button. We tend to think of life as invincible, but this theory reminds us that its greatest enemy might be itself. It's interesting to think about whether you would guess that there are people who find pleasure simply in the process. These individuals are called autotelics. They don't need money, praise, or fame to engage in their favorite activities. Their motivation comes from within. They can passionately draw, program, play an instrument, or write books, losing track of time. In psychology, autotelics are considered more resilient to stress and often experience a state of flow, where a person is completely absorbed in the task. For them, the outcome is not as important as the journey itself. It's like finding joy not only in the journey, but also in the very act of moving forward. What if I told you that the eyes of mantis shrimp are more complex than human eyes? These tiny predators have unique vision. Each eye has 3 pupils and up to 16 types of light-sensitive cells. In comparison, humans have only 3. Mantis shrimp can see ultraviolet, infrared, and even polarized light. Their vision is so extraordinary that it helps scientists develop new camera and sensor technologies. It turns out that within the tiny body of this crustacean lies a biological supercosmos that surpasses the capabilities of our eyes and even the best cameras. Galapagos marine iguanas can hold their breath for up to an hour. These unusual lizards live in the Galapagos and feed on seaweed. To find food, they dive into the ocean and can stay underwater for up to 60 minutes. Their bodies are adapted so that blood is directed only to vital organs during this time, conserving oxygen. They expel excess salt through special glands in their noses, sneezing out salty droplets. On land, they bask in the sun, while in the sea, they become true underwater divers. This is a unique example of reptiles adapting to oceanic life. A story that challenges conventional understanding. Lomonosov discovered the atmosphere of Venus. In the 18th century, while observing Venus transit across the sun, Mikhail Lomonosov noticed a glowing halo around the planet. He deduced that this was not an optical illusion, but evidence of an atmosphere. This discovery made him the first person to prove that another planet has its own envelope. For modern astronomers, this seems obvious, but at the time it was revolutionary. Lomonosov demonstrated that scientific intuition and careful observation can reveal what is invisible to others. It sounds incredible, but there was a cartel that limited the lifespan of light bulbs. In the 1920s, the largest light manufacturers created the Phoebus cartel. They agreed that bulbs should not last longer than 1,000 hours. If a company produced a more durable product, it was fined. This artificially maintained demand, people kept buying new bulbs over and over again. Meanwhile, it's known that bulbs can last for decades. There's still a lamp in a California fire station that has been working for over 100 years. This example became a symbol of planned obsolescence and showed that businesses can even control the light in our homes. Who would have thought that the hockey mask was invented by a Japanese man? In 1936, goalie Teiji Honma took to the ice in unusual gear, a face mask resembling a samurai helmet. His idea seemed strange at the time, but it later became the foundation for modern protective equipment in hockey. Today, it's hard to imagine a goalie without a mask, but it was once considered unnecessary. Honma was a pioneer who blended the traditions of his culture with the sport. Thanks to him, hockey gained an item that has saved the health of thousands of players around the world. Who would have thought that an albatross can fly for hours without flapping its wings? These seabirds are true masters of gliding. They skillfully use the air currents over the ocean, allowing them to soar for hours with minimal energy expenditure. Some albatrosses spend years at sea, rarely landing on land. They sleep on the water, feed on fish, and feel at home in the ocean. Imagine a whole life in the sky above the sea, where wings become sails. Albatrosses are a symbol of freedom, and their ability to fly almost effortlessly amazes even scientists. Even the great Benjamin Franklin used electricity for fun pranks. One of the founding fathers of the United States was not only a politician and scientist, but also a big fan of practical jokes. Franklin conducted experiments with electricity and once electrified the crown in a portrait of King George II of England. When guests tried to touch it, they were shocked. Franklin laughed and called this trick the electric shock of treason. Sometimes he would ask people to hold hands so the shock would pass along, creating a whole chain of laughing conspirators. For him, even science was an opportunity for fun. Even strict scientific satellites can have cartoon nicknames. In 2002, the GRACE mission was launched. 2 satellites that flew one after the other in the same orbit. Their task was to measure gravitational changes on Earth. One satellite would slightly speed up as it passed over mountain ranges, drifting away from the other, and then they would come back together. Scientists joked that they were playing tag and nicknamed them Tom and Jerry. It's amusing that a serious scientific project of global significance received a name from a children's cartoon. And it became so entrenched that it turned into the mission's official informal name. It may seem that sports should unite people, but one day a football field became the spark for war. It sounds absurd, but in 1969, football matches were the last straw in the conflict between Honduras and El Salvador. The teams faced off on the field, but underlying their game were much sharper issues: overpopulation, land disputes, and social tension. The matches added fuel to the fire, leading to a war that would later be called the Football War. It lasted only a few days but claimed thousands of lives. The irony is that a sport meant for unity and joy unexpectedly became the trigger for a real tragedy. Even carousels in different countries spin in different directions. In the UK, carousels traditionally rotate clockwise, while in the US and continental Europe, they turn counterclockwise. This difference stems from the fact that in the past, carousel figures were designed for easier mounting from the left side. In Britain, one direction was deemed correct, while across the ocean, they chose another. This resulted in a curious situation. The same amusement moves in opposite directions in different parts of the world. It may seem like a minor detail, but it highlights how culture influences even entertainment. Do you want to hear one of the strangest reasons for toxicity? Bright poison dart frogs are deadly. Their skin secretes a toxin that can kill a human. But here's the surprising part. They are not toxic on their own. In captivity, where they are fed a regular diet, their skin becomes safe. It turns out the secret lies in their diet. In the wild, they eat specific ants and insects that contain toxic substances, so the poison is a result of their nutrition. Nature seems to show that even a small frog can become a weapon if it has the right ingredients on its menu. Do you want to know where the term carbon footprint came from? Today, this term refers to an individual's contribution to atmospheric pollution, but few know that the idea was conceived by the oil and gas giant BP. The company hired advertising specialists to shift the focus from industrial emissions to the responsibility of ordinary people. Thus, the myth of personal guilt for the climate crisis was born. As a result, millions began to track how many bags they used or how many kilometers they traveled, while corporations continued to extract oil. It turns out that the very concept we perceive as environmental was originally a clever marketing ploy. It's hard to believe, but guilt can arise even from happiness. In psychology, this is referred to as survivor's guilt. This state is often experienced by people who have survived a tragedy or those who are doing well while their loved ones are suffering. Joy can feel like a betrayal. A person may start to feel internal discomfort because they have what others lack: health, a job, a family. It's paradoxical, as happiness should bring joy, yet sometimes it becomes a burden. This phenomenon reminds us that emotions do not always follow logic. In the United States, sheriffs are not appointed officials, but elected positions. Unlike many countries where police chiefs are appointed by the state, in America, residents of the county elect their sheriff. The term can range from 2 to 6 years, and it is the people who decide whom to trust with maintaining order. The sheriff leads their department, hires deputies, and operates independently from the FBI or police. Today, there are about 3,500 sheriff's offices in the U.S., ranging from small ones with 2 people to large ones with thousands of employees. Thus, the sheriff is both a law enforcement officer and a politician who must earn the trust of their community. Did you know that avocado can be deadly for animals? For humans, this fruit is beneficial. Vitamins, healthy fats, trendy toasts. But for birds and horses, avocado is toxic. A substance called persin in their bodies can cause severe poisoning, sometimes with fatal outcomes. So what is a superfood for us is a poison for animals. This highlights the point that we can't measure everything by human standards. Even familiar foods can be dangerous if an organism isn't adapted to them. What is beneficial for one form of life can be harmful to another. In Pakistan, you can find a tree bound in real chains. Since 1898, there has been an arrested tree. The legend says that a British officer, in a drunken state, believed the tree was about to escape and ordered it to be chained. Absurd? Of course, but the tree still stands with its iron shackles, now as a tourist attraction. People come to see this strange combination of nature and human imagination. It has become a true prisoner of conscience, only green and silent. What a surprise! The lines on a basketball were not designed for aesthetics. These stripes help players grip the ball firmly and better control its movement. Try playing with an old smooth ball, and you'll immediately notice the difference. It slips out of your hands and shots become inaccurate. The lines provide traction for the fingers and allow for quick changes in the ball's direction. For spectators, it's just a familiar design element, but for players, it's an unnoticed yet vital tool. It turns out that the outcome of an entire game can depend on a few stripes applied to the orange surface. The story of Arthur Tudor and Catherine of Aragon illustrates that even a common language doesn't always prevent misunderstandings. When Arthur Tudor, the brother of the future Henry VIII, first met his fiancée, Catherine of Aragon, it turned out they could not communicate verbally. The issue was that their correspondence had been in Latin, but their pronunciations were so different that they simply couldn't understand each other. It's amusing that a language considered universal among the European nobility ultimately let the young couple down. Imagine, beautiful, formal letters, but in reality just gestures and confused looks. Interestingly, even the mightiest trees have a limit to their growth. It turns out that no tree on the planet can exceed a height of about 130 meters. The reason lies in physics. Water cannot rise up the trunk beyond a certain level. It's like trying to drink through a straw the length of a skyscraper. At some point, the liquid simply stops. This is why even the majestic sequoias, the tallest trees in the world, come to a halt at this invisible threshold. We look up at them in awe of their grandeur, but they too are subject to the strict laws of nature, which draw a line where it seems there could be infinity. In psychology, there is an intriguing phenomenon known as the wonderful women effect. Research has shown that both men and women tend to attribute more positive qualities to women. The term wonderful women effect emerged in the 1990s when sociologists noticed that women received more favorable ratings in surveys than men. Interestingly, women themselves exhibited even greater bias than men. This doesn't mean that women are always better. Rather, society subconsciously idealizes them. Such an effect can even influence politics, careers, or court decisions, as perception often outweighs facts. Strangely enough, the word robot was not coined by a scientist, but by a writer. The Czech playwright Karel Čapek introduced the term in his play RUR. Initially, he wanted to call artificial people laboras, derived from the Latin word for work, but his artist brother suggested the shorter and catchier robot from the Czech word for work. Thus, literature gifted science a term that has now become part of everyday life. It's amusing that the technology changing the world began with a science fiction play and a chance word choice in a conversation between two brothers. The story of Charles Goodyear proves that even the greatest discovery does not guarantee happiness and wealth. Charles Goodyear, the man who discovered the process of rubber vulcanization, lived a life filled with debt and legal troubles. He accidentally found a way to make rubber durable and resistant to heat and cold, but instead of riches, he faced endless problems. Goodyear died a poor man, never seeing the recognition he deserved. 40 years after his death, the Goodyear Company emerged, simply adopting his name as a mark of respect. Today, millions of cars run on tires bearing his name, but the inventor received not a penny from it. The story serves as a reminder that talent does not always go hand in hand with luck. Avocado nearly vanished from the face of the earth and survived only thanks to humans. Once, giant Pleistocene animals, mammoths, giant sloths, and woolly rhinoceroses devoured avocado fruits whole and helped spread the seeds. But these giants went extinct, and the plant could have disappeared with them. However, humans stepped in. Our ancestors began cultivating avocados and preserving their culture for millennia. Today, we see it as a trendy ingredient for smoothies and toast, but in reality, it serves as a living reminder that many species survived solely because humans became their partners. It turns out that the rubber snake is not just a toy, but a real animal. In Canada, there is a harmless snake with the surprising name of rubber. It is completely safe for humans and is even used in therapy for people with phobias. Due to its calm nature and soft body, it is used for gradual acclimatization to snakes. There have been no recorded cases of attacks on humans. Interestingly, the rubber snake that we usually think of as a prank toy actually exists in nature and helps people overcome their fears. Sometimes even the names of animals sound like a joke from nature. Did you know that scientists experimented with inverted glasses? In the 1890s, psychologist George Stratton gave volunteers special glasses that turned the image upside down. In the first few days, people stumbled, struggled to eat or write, but gradually the brain adapted. After a week, they were seeing the world correctly again. And when they took off the glasses, everything around them appeared inverted once more. This experiment demonstrated that perception is not rigidly fixed. The brain is capable of reshaping our view of the world. It turns out that we see reality not with our eyes, but with our minds, which learn to interpret it. In the 1990s, artists Vitaly Kamar and Alexander Melamed, along with composer Dave Soldier, set out to create the most terrible song in history. They aimed to produce a piece that would be as unbearable to listen to as possible. They gathered all the musical elements that people found annoying: a children's choir, Operatic rap, banjos, synthesizers, and absurd lyrics about hypermarkets and Coca-Cola. The result was a 20-minute track that is truly difficult to listen to all the way through. The experiment proved that art has not only peaks of beauty, but also depths of discord, and there is a certain charm in that as well. Sometimes pirates went to sea not for gold, but for hats. In the 17th century, English pirate Benjamin Hornigold once stopped a merchant ship, but he wasn't interested in gold or spices. He and his crew had overindulged the night before and thrown their hats overboard. So Hornigold demanded only new headgear from the crew. It's a funny situation. Imagine how terrified the merchants were, expecting a robbery, only to be told, "We just need hats." Even fearsome pirates found themselves in silly everyday situations. Did you know that linear perspective in painting is a little trick of the eye? Renaissance artists began to use a special technique for constructing space that made the painting appear three-dimensional. The secret lies in the lines and shadows that create the illusion of depth, even though the canvas remains flat. Sometimes it seems as if the gaze of a character in the painting literally follows you wherever you go. It's a play of light, shadow, and perspective. For the modern eye, this is familiar, but in the 14th century, such works look like true magic, as if the artist had managed to turn a piece of fabric into a window to another world. Strangely enough, it's a fact. Products are intentionally made to be short-lived. This practice is called planned obsolescence. Manufacturers incorporate parts into their devices that break down after a few years, or stop producing spare parts to force people to buy new products. This applies to phones, printers, light bulbs, and even clothing. For companies, it's a way to earn more, while for consumers, it's a constant race for upgrades. The paradox is that technology advances, yet items increasingly last less than they could. This is not a coincidence, but a carefully crafted strategy. You won't believe it, but the sugar industry has been hiding the truth for decades. In the mid-20th century, sugar producers funded research that shifted the blame for heart disease onto fats and cholesterol. Scientists published articles that downplayed the dangers of sugar, redirecting attention to dangerous fats. As a result, entire generations believed that sweets were relatively safe, while the real threat was butter and meat. It was only later revealed that excess sugar is directly linked to obesity and diseases. This is one example of how business can rewrite science for its own benefit. Even wild wolves know how to wag their tails, and they do it with a specific meaning. We are used to dogs expressing joy and friendliness this way, but their wild ancestors, the wolves, do the same thing, albeit with a different significance. Young wolves wag their tails in front of older ones, showing respect and submission. Sometimes the tail helps to ease a tense situation. It's a way of saying, "I'm not a threat. I acknowledge your authority." So this gesture in dogs is not a coincidence, but an ancient legacy. It's amusing to think that when you play with your dog's tail, you're witnessing an echo of the behavior of its distant ancestors who lived in forests and packs. Ocean giants like sperm whales can communicate over thousands of kilometers. These massive creatures use powerful vibrations to communicate, which travel through water over great distances. Scientists suggest that one sperm whale can call another located on the other side of the ocean. However, these same vibrations can be dangerous for humans. Getting too close can lead to paralysis or even death. It turns out that sperm whales have their own underwater telephone network that operates far more efficiently than many of our technologies. Their language has not yet been fully deciphered, but it is already clear that it is one of the most complex systems in the animal kingdom. The myxomatosis virus nearly wiped out rabbits in Europe within a few years. French microbiologist Armand Delille tried to control the rabbit population on his estate by infecting them with the myxomatosis virus. However, the disease spiraled out of control. Within a few years, the virus spread across Europe and killed 98% of the rabbits. The culprit was fined, but the damage was done. An entire species was on the brink of extinction. Fortunately, rabbits proved to be resilient and gradually recovered their numbers. This case became one of the most striking examples of how human intervention can lead to ecological disaster. You won't believe it, but at the funeral of a US president, a parrot was cursing. Andrew Jackson, the seventh president of America, had a favorite parrot. His owner often swore, and the bird quickly picked up the habit. When Jackson died, the parrot was brought to the funeral, but instead of a solemn silence, guests heard a stream of strong language. The priest had to ask for it to be removed to avoid embarrassing the attendees. It created a strange scene. A president known for his character and his feathered friend, who seemed to continue his speech even after death. This story shows that even parrots can leave a vivid legacy. The story of Jack Daniels holds a secret. Its origins are linked to a black master distiller. Nathan Nearest Green was born into slavery, and after gaining his freedom, he became a true master of distillation. He taught young Jack Daniel the art of whiskey making. Today, his name is officially recognized as the first head distiller at the distillery where the legendary brand later emerged. For a long time, this was kept quiet, and only recently has the story come to light. It turns out that the recipe for the famous whiskey owes its existence to a man who was nearly forgotten. This serves as a reminder that behind many brands, there are invisible heroes. Did you know that the largest island nation is Indonesia? This country consists of over 17,000 islands, but the exact number is still unknown, even to the government. Some islands disappear underwater, while others emerge from volcanoes. Indonesia is like a living puzzle that is constantly changing. It is the largest archipelago on the planet, and its geography contributes to its diversity, from tropical beaches to dense jungles and sprawling megacities. Here, literally every area is a separate world with its own culture, language, and traditions. The story of the first feature film in human history remains forever incomplete. In 1906, Australia produced The Story of the Kelly Gang, a film that lasted over an hour, which was a technical marvel for its time. Audiences were thrilled, but only a quarter of the film has survived to this day. The rest is irretrievably lost. Imagine if the first novel by Tolstoy or an early painting by Picasso had vanished. We know the film existed and understand its significance, but future viewers will never experience it in its entirety. The history of cinema began with a mystery that will always remain untold. The tall towers on old fire stations were not just for aesthetics, but for practical purposes. If you look closely at these old buildings, you can almost always see a high tower. It served not only for watching over the city and signaling fires, but also for drying long hoses after use. Wet hoses couldn't be stored coiled up. They would deteriorate quickly, so they were hung in the tower where they could stretch down to their full length. Sometimes signal balls or lanterns were displayed on the tower to inform neighboring stations about a fire. Thus, these towers functioned as dryers, communication systems, and symbols of vigilance. In Hong Kong, some people live in apartments the size of a typical wardrobe. Due to the housing shortage, so-called coffin apartments have emerged. Their area can be as small as 4 square meters, roughly the size of a large bed. People literally live in boxes. A small bed, a narrow shelf, sometimes a tiny table, and that's it. These apartments are officially called micro-apartments, but the residents ironically refer to them as coffins. The UN has even labeled this phenomenon an affront to human dignity. Imagine, after a long workday, you return not to a home, but to a cramped box where you can't even stand up straight. Sometimes reality sounds like fiction. There is a lamp that has been burning for over 100 years. In the fire station of Livermore, California, a light bulb lit in 1901 is still shining. It has outlasted generations, wars, and technological changes, yet it continues to glow. Scientists have examined it and confirmed its authenticity. The reason lies in its carbon filament and its very low wattage. Interestingly, back then, lamps were made to last for centuries, while today they barely last a couple of years. This little lamp has become a symbol of a time when things were created not for profit, but for durability. In India, a man spent 22 years in court over an overpayment of 20 rupees. Tungnath Chaturvedi, an Indian resident, bought a train ticket and the cashier made a mistake in the calculations. The overpayment was only 20 rupees, less than half a dollar. But the principle turned out to be more important. Chaturvedi filed a lawsuit and sought justice for a full 22 years, attending hundreds of hearings. In the end, he won. The railways were ordered to refund the overpayment and pay compensation with interest. This story illustrates that sometimes it's not about the money, but about the determination of a person willing to go to great lengths for justice, even over a trivial amount. Who would have thought that such strange facts are hidden behind familiar things? If you enjoyed being surprised with me, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. There will be even more crazy stories ahead that you definitely haven't heard before.